The Dallas Cowboys finally made a big-time move, and I think it sets them up for a big-time comeback in 2025. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we are going to continue our biggest question series, talk about what the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay can truly accomplish, talk about the big questions the 49ers have on offense, but we're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys and whether they can come back and be a relevant team this season. Before we dive in, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Thank you for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. But with that being said, Michelle, I know that I may be drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit too much, but I was begging the Dallas Cowboys to be interesting during the offseason. They did exactly that by adding George Pickens. Dak Prescott back healthy will be the key, but the biggest question for the Cowboys to me is their head coach. And Schottenheimer, what can he be? Brian Schottenheimer now in charge, a promotion there. I'm not certain if that's going to work, but at the same time, I feel like the Cowboys just have a lot of talent on the team and now really good wide receiver group of weapons there. Added some at running back, although it's still not perfect. But getting Dak Prescott back healthy, who I like Dak Prescott more than I think the average Bear does, quite honestly. So him back healthy, I think, makes a big difference. And I think they have enough talent on the team to really be, I think the Cowboys make the playoffs this year, I guess, is my ultimate take at the end of the day and what I see from them.
Could they make the playoffs? Sure. But we know now that the division is super hard with the Eagles dominating and then the Commanders coming to life last year, and they should only get better. We'll see what happens with the Giants. We still expect them to be bad. Now, don't get me wrong. I think, yes, Dak Prescott is hugely important to this team. They're better with him. But let's not forget they were 3-5 with Dak Prescott last year before the injury. So It's not like they're winning. You brought up the concerns with the head coach and Brian Schottenheimer. We have no idea what to expect. It was a very uninspiring hire, to say the least. But then also defensive coordinator being Matt Eberflus now. I mean, they allowed the second most points per game in the league last year. So they need to really fix that. Matt Eberflus maybe can go back to being a good defensive play caller. We'll see. Disaster as a head coach. And then also really interesting hire for their special teams with Nick Sorensen, because he was such a bad DC with the 49ers last year. And the 49ers special teams was so incredibly bad last year. You would think if Nick Sorensen was good in that area, he would have helped out. Who knows? So a lot of interesting hires. I don't really know anything about Clayton Adams, their offensive coordinator, so I can't really speak on him. But, the George Pickens trade was great. They've been looking for a good wide receiver too with Dak Prescott. Love that. But the run game is still so yuck. I mean, after last year, right, with the run game being so bad with Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle. Dowdle was fine, but, they just couldn't get it going. You thought they had to put an emphasis on fixing it this year. And their emphasis was Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders and Jaden Blue, who's a smaller back in the 5th round. I still don't think they did enough this year to be true Super Bowl contenders.
See, I think that's fair, and I agree. Their running back position, one of the worst in the entire NFL by far. But I think at the core of what made the Cowboys a good run team, we could talk about Zeke, who was a great player in his prime, obviously really fell off. But that offensive line was able to move people, and maybe their answer to fixing the run game was drafting Tyler Booker early in the first round and what seemed, one of the big reach picks I think a lot of people saw. But if Booker does turn into a good player, his style, his mauling, road grading style, big, physical, it would certainly help the run game as well. Tyler Guyton needs to take a step at left tackle. I think that's going to be big for them going forward. But I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the offensive side of the ball for the Cowboys when the defensive side of the ball may be the actual key. And our guys from Locked On Cowboys talked about that recently.
I think the Cowboys might have a top 10 defense this year. I mean, I certainly think that a lot of things might have to break the right way. But if you look at the Cowboys defense, despite, being absolutely near the very bottom and bottom three in several run defense categories, there was certain aspects of the Cowboys defense that was pretty good as far as pass rushing and pass defense when they had healthy folks. And then it kind of all fell apart once they got major injuries at specifically the cornerback and defensive end position. But if they're able to stay healthy, they do have components. They do have pieces at some key positions that they've been able to hold over. And if, Eberflus can kind of paper over some of the run defensive stuff just by making the personnel play a more defensive-minded system, I think that could put offenses in a kind of precarious position, and the Cowboys defense could kind of unleash some of the superstars that have felt like they've been sidelined by teams that are able to just run all over the Cowboys' run defense.
Yeah, part of me just believes as long as Micah Parsons is healthy and on the field, that you're not going to have a bad defense. And I think we saw that last year, like in the second half of the year, once Micah got back on the field, this was a much better unit. Yes, they had their games where they struggled, the Philadelphia game, the Houston game, but we saw them play really well against Tampa Bay and Cincinnati, two of the best offenses in the league. I think your defense's ceiling and floor is going to be dependent on the players around Micah, but I think the talent is probably better now than it was later in the year. I think the question is, when can they get back Trayvon Diggs and DeMarvion Overshown, and will the young guys be able to step up? Because I do think they have the ability to have a pretty good defense.
So I guess the idea is if the offensive line is improved, which helps improve the run game, and now you have that bona fide number 2 wide receiver that you were missing so badly, and if the defense, maybe top 10, it was their bold predictions, maybe top 10 is reaching it, but if you got a middle-of-the-road defense in Dallas, that could turn into a pretty competitive team, and if some of those guys get back and, some things do break right, that could be a pretty talented defense.
It's just funny though, but I know all fan bases do this, right? They try to talk themselves into stuff, but saying they got better in the second half of the season and being like, they played good against the Bengals. Joe Burrow had 369 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Jamar Chase had 177 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Chase Brown had over 100 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. That's just a silly thing to say. And then they faced a lot of really bad teams in the second half of the stretch, but they were not good against the Bengals whatsoever. And then they played the Panthers. Cool. They were somewhat good against the Buccaneers, still allowed 24 points. They got destroyed by the Eagles, lost to the Commanders, and then, you beat the Giants, cool, and played good defense against the Giants and the Panthers. But saying they got better in the second half of the season, I just think is not correct. And they added some players on defense, cool, and, traded for Elam, the corner from Buffalo, added linebackers, Kenneth Murray, Dante Fowler Jr., but they also lost, Chauncey Golston, who was their second most sacked guy last year, and Jordan Lewis, who was second on the team in passes defense. They lost pieces just as much as they added them. I'm worried about this team a lot more than the fan base is, a lot more than you are.
Yes, it does appear so. Now, I like Donovan Ezaraku, who they drafted in the second round on the defensive line. I think that'll help him a little bit too as well at edge. He's a guy who's ready to play right now. So I guess I like some of the pieces that they have. Obviously, Deron Bland can be a good player, and Trevon Diggs, if he gets back. They got Siobhan Revell, who I liked a lot. Some people had in the first round at corner, who's going to have to come back from injury, but that could be a very talented player. I really do like DeMarvion Overshown, so I would like to see him back out there. I could see the Cowboys turning it up, but you're right. Maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid, and it's crazy. But we will see if another team can bounce back this year in the NFC, and it is the San Francisco 49ers, and they have a lot of questions about what the offense is going to look like now. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I didn't realize just how much money I was spending on like online shopping, and then I got Monarch and it let me track my spending so I could figure out exactly what I was doing. I can also plan my long-term goals and make sure, that I'm taking care of unwanted subscriptions and different things like that. You can really take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Talked about the Dallas Cowboys, but now I want to get into the San Francisco 49ers, a team near and dear to Michelle's heart, of course. Looking at the 49ers, they made a lot of changes. They've lost, some key backups and some key players on the offensive line, although how good those key players are can be debated. But Deebo Samuel gets traded. Regardless of whether we think some of these changes with the San Francisco 49ers are for the better or for the worse, they certainly will look different, and they'll have to have a totally different offensive plan at times without Deebo Samuel, who's a key weapon. What do you think? I think the biggest question for the 49ers for me is, what will the new attack look like and what will it be based on?
The new attack, it will be interesting to see how Kyle Shanahan, utilizes his weapons now that he doesn't have Deebo Samuel to lean on, but I think that's better. He relied too much on Deebo Samuel, and Samuel was a very inconsistent player, and I think that hurt them a lot. Now that he's going to have to get out of his comfort zone, he has to, be comfortable utilizing these young guys, which he never has been, but then also giving George Kittle more targets, please, because he's so stinking good. Kittle is just over the last 2 years, he's done this, but Kittle is one of 3 players to have multiple seasons with over 1,000 receiving yards and fewer than 100 targets. And he did it in 2024 and 2023. The other 2 players to do this in NFL history have been A.J. Brown and Deshaun Jackson. So A.J. Brown, a monster of a man, wide receiver.
Probably with the Titans.
Yeah, and Deshaun Jackson, who we're talking about is maybe one of the best deep threats in NFL history, right? So, what he does, he leads the NFL in yards per target over the last 2 seasons, which is insane for a tight end to do, at 11.6 yards per target. He's the only tight end to average over 10 yards per target over the last 2 years. He needs to be targeted more and be the focal point of this offense. And I think without having Ayuk there for the first, half of the season, without having Deebo Samuel there, it will force him to do that. And I'm really excited to see this offense can look like with him as the focal point of the offense.
Folks, if the data doesn't drive home, then Michelle knows what she's talking about. Let's just throw it to our local experts from Locked On 49ers so they can give you more information about just how right Michelle is. It's George Kittle time, folks.
It's frustrating because you're watching the game. You're like, how is George Kittle? He had only 4 targets in this game, 6 targets in this game. And you look at a per game basis for George Kittle and his targets, 6.49 targets per game for his career. Last year was lower than that, 6.27, 5.63 targets per game the year before in 2023. 2022 is 5.73 targets. He's only been over 7 targets a game 3 times in his career. And obviously one of those years was his biggest season, his breakout year, year 2, where he had 136 targets, 88 catches, 1,377 yards that year. The next year, he had 1,000 yards receiving, had 107 targets, only 2 times he's ever been targeted, 100 times in a season. And then you go over to Travis Kelce. And since 2015 all the way through 2024, so for 10 years, he was targeted 100 times every single season. The least of those being 103 in year 3 of his career. Then he went on a run of 8 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons, and his targets were 117, 122, 150, 136, 145, 134, 152, 121, 133. Most of those were more targets than George Kittle's ever had in a season. I get that George Kittle's a good blocker, but I just think he could be featured more as a receiver, and I think potentially things like accolades like Hall of Fame and quarter century teams, all decade teams, whatever. He's going to be riding in the shadow of a guy that he's a better football player than. And that's a little bit frustrating because the numbers, you're going to look at receiving numbers, and you can't argue against Travis Kelce in that regard.
That's a little bit of a take right there from my guy Brian Peacock that George Kittle is a better football player than Travis Kelce. I know that George Kittle is a better blocker than Travis Kelce, but I think the receiving talent that Travis Kelce shows and the consistency of that outweighs the difference between them as blockers. I'm still going to go with Travis Kelce there, but I mean...
Well, you'd be wrong, but...
Then sell it for me there. Like, this truly is Kyle Shanahan's fault, and George Kittle should just blame him if he doesn't get the Hall of Fame?
Well, George Kittle's going to make the Hall of Fame. I'm not worried about that. It's just the fact that Kelce has consistently gotten an insane amount of targets in his offense, and Kittle has been used much more as a blocker because of how good he is in that area. But don't get it wrong. Run blocking or pass blocking is the second best thing that George Kittle does. He is an elite receiving tight end. I have another fun stat to share. So again, going back to the yards per target, because just to show how much he does on the few targets he does get, he's the only tight end to average at least 11 yards per target in a season with at least 75 targets since at least 1992, since, the NFL started, what am I trying to say?
Right?
Tracking targets. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Kittle did so in both 2024 and 2023, and he's still the only tight end to do it. But these are the top 6 seasons. It goes Kittle's 2024 season, 11.8 yards per target. Kittle's 2023 season, 11.3. Then you have Rob Gronkowski with 2 seasons in 2011 and 2017 at 10.7 and 10.3. Hall of Fame Antonio Gates in 2009 at 10.2. And then George Kittle again in 2018 at 10.1. Those are the top 6 seasons of tight ends and yards per target. Travis Kelce doesn't come close to this list anywhere. And Kittle is on this list 3 times among the top 6 and has each of the top 2. You tell me right now, if you give this man 140 or 150 targets like Travis Kelce has consistently seen in his career, Kittle would be downright the easiest guy to say he's the best tight end in the league.
Well, I hope that we get to see it. Now, obviously, we know George Kittle is very good, and that point has been driven home. But my question is, outside of George Kittle, that's where I start to wonder how they're going to do this. Brandon Ayuk, you think eventually he's back healthy, but even outside of those two, Juwan Jennings is who he is. He's a very good player, good depth piece for them. But Ricky Pearsall, is he going to step up? And then outside of Ricky Pearsall, where am I supposed to, Demarcus Robinson is just another guy, type of veteran. Jacob Cowing, I like Jacob Cowing as like a yards after catch option, but has he stepped up? They draft Jordan Watkins in the 4th round this year. Is he going to be able to step up? I think it's outside of George Kittle and Juwan Jennings for me. There's a ton of uncertainty, and Brock Purdy with that much uncertainty outside of that, I wonder how that works out. It's who's going to step up outside of George Kittle and even Brandon Ayuk when he gets back that I think will define what the 49ers are able to do.
Yeah, and I do think they need one of those young guys, in Jacob Cowing or Watkins, to step up slightly. I don't think they have to be anything special. You need Ricky Pearsall to step up big time in his second year. Ayuk, when he comes back, we'll see what he can do coming off that injury. But I think you're missing a huge part, right? It's Christian McCaffrey. If he's healthy this year, that changes everything. A big part of their struggles last year is that Purdy didn't have that check down. He did not trust Jordan Mason. He's just not a receiving back. And his average depth of target or average depth of, pass attempt was very, very high last year for Purdy. That needs to come down a little bit more, and he needs to be safer with the ball. And I think when he has his safety net in Christian McCaffrey, that changes things. So I don't think they need a top 10 wide receiver on their team when they have the top tight end in the league, the top running back receiver in the league. I don't think we have to worry too much about the wide receivers.
Is Christian McCaffrey still the top receiving back in the league?
Who would you put?
Jahmyr Gibbs at least is ready to have a conversation, And if we got to see it from McCaffrey, he's a guy who he's getting older. He's had a ton of work. He's been a part of deep playoff runs in San Francisco now. It could be time for McCaffrey he's not the big specimen Hercules that like a Derrick Henry is for longevity. He's just a regular size guy, really. So, well, maybe not regular size, but for NFL standards, he's not an overly monstrous running back. So the wear and tear may build up. I think it is a big question mark right now whether Christian McCaffrey can come back and be that level of player for an entire season. I think if you had to choose as you're building a dynasty, you're building your own football team in the NFL, I think you'd take Jahmyr Gibbs for the season over Christian McCaffrey right now.
Well, he's so much younger and great. Yeah. Overall. And
well,
you don't have to worry so much about
one game, you might take Gibbs over McCaffrey right now. I think it would be a conversation.
I call McCaffrey the best receiving back. I didn't say overall. I would take Gibbs as well.
I think Gibbs could be there now.
I think
Gibbs could be there.
The 49ers do have a 23-4 record in the regular season with McCaffrey as a starter.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I'm actually I would have focused more on defense in this section of the thing I'm most worried about. We went offense. There are definitely some worries there. There's worries across this whole team, but their schedule is so easy. I still have to put them as a playoff team, but there's definitely a huge question mark. I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses for them. I am worried about this roster overall.
Well, I think rosters just go quicker than maybe people think. And I was talking about the Indianapolis Colts, and that's something that me and Ross are going to talk about on tomorrow's show. And the Colts are a team who had a really, really good roster for those years when they had Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz and stuff. But the roster isn't as good as it was then. So you probably can't get away with a competitive season with Daniel Jones right now. But that's a conversation for tomorrow's show when me and the mastermind dive into that. But the 49ers and whether their roster is still as good as it was when they went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, that'll be a question that needs to be answered as well. But sticking in the NFC, another really, really good team that we wonder just how good can they be, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. I love that it's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Our big question series continues on. We talked about the Cowboys, talked about the 49ers. We're going to stick in the NFC here. Talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because Tampa Bay had an incredible offense last year. Just an incredible offense, tons of talent. They do lose Liam Cohen, who goes to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you wonder how everything will work out there. But it's undeniable that they've added even more talent to that offense. You look at Emeka Egbuka as a pick in the first round. He has been absolutely tremendous in the offseason work that they've done so far, according to reports out of camp. And of course, they still have their dynamic duo up at the top with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And my guy, James Yarko from Locked On Bucks, thinks that might be the best wide receiver duo in the NFL.
No one has legitimately been able to show that there is another room in the league better than this one. Every argument has been about the top two receivers being allegedly better than the top two in Tampa. Sure, there are plenty of number one receivers that are more athletic or faster than Mike Evans, but none of them have been able to do what Mike has done. And there are number two receivers that are better deep threats than Godwin, but none of them have been more reliable or have better hands. The Bucs duo has consistently and reliably gotten the job done better than pretty much any other duo you can name since they formed.
Now, just based on talent, and I don't have these two wide receivers, their yardage totals, touchdowns, catches, all added up in front of me, but just based on talent, I don't think that I would put Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as the top wide receiver duo, but I guess I understand the general point of their consistency, their reliability. Like, these guys just always get it done, and if Chris Godwin comes back healthy, which based on that contract, $22 million a year, I would assume that Tampa Bay thinks he's healthy. You have those two guys as your start, and then you add in Jalen McMillan, who started to pop at the end of last year. You add in Emeka Egbuka, who I think is just going to be such a consistent and immediate contributor. With Cade Otton, Bucky Irving's probably going to take a step in the backfield. They have a really good offensive line. There's just so much continuity there that I know this sounds crazy, but I just don't care about the offensive coordinator change. Like, Baker Mayfield, that O-line, they know enough of what to do that they can lead the offensive coordinator if they need to and have success.
I mean, if any quarterback, too, is going to have success with a new offensive coordinator, it's Baker Mayfield. I mean, every single year he has a new offensive coordinator. I mean, He went from Cleveland, where he had 4 different offensive coordinators in a 4-season span. He had, new coordinator in Carolina when he was there, and then also, was with the Rams for a second with Liam Cohen, the same guy. Dave Canales in 2023, that he leaves, they get Liam Cohen, he leaves, and now they have Josh Grizzard, who they promoted from passing game coordinator. So it shouldn't be that big of a change for Baker Mayfield. But even if it is, there's no one better equipped for the change than Baker, who just consistently has to learn a new offense. Now, what you might say is, okay, Baker repeating 41 passing touchdowns when that was a huge, best year of his career by far. Maybe that's going to be very, very hard for him to repeat. However, when you break up all the weapons he has and you consider that Chris Godwin only played 7 games last year. Mike Evans missed 4 games last year. He was, Cade Otton was the second highest receiving yard guy on this team last year, and he still put up those numbers. I mean, this offense should still be thriving. I think the biggest worry you have to say is, will the defense be better? But I'm really not worried about the offensive coordinator change at all.
Yeah, I'm with you there. They're going to figure it out. But on defense, you do look, and they need a little more from the pass rush. And bringing in Hassan Reddick, who I remember was a big story. He skipped the voluntary. Oh, here we go with Hassan Reddick again. But he's in there. Reports out of camp have been that he's been dominating out there. He's been excellent. He's been good to go. Kalijah Kancey needs to take a step forward. We know Vita Vea is a very good player. I think that they do have enough on defense to make something happen here. I guess I don't think it would be crazy if we had to look at teams off the top, outside of the top 6, and with Baltimore and Kansas City and Buffalo, the Lions, the Eagles, the 49ers, who will probably be back in that mix again. Just the teams that we talk about that really make sense. I think Tampa Bay may be a team that's just off the side of that, who, if Tampa Bay made it to the Super Bowl, I would not be entirely shocked.
Yeah, it would be shocking, right? A little bit, just because.
Can we say surprise, but not shock?
Yeah.
Can we cut that? Yeah.
Yeah, but if they make a deep playoff run, I won't be surprised at all. I personally, I trust in Baker Mayfield a lot more than other people. I just love him so much. I named my dog after him. That's how much I love Baker Mayfield. I used to live in Cleveland, especially when they drafted him. I lived there, so I just loved him. But I do believe in this team. I think they win the division yet again. It would be the 5th straight season they win the division. Yep. I don't think they have much competition there to win it. The Saints don't even have a quarterback. I guess the Falcons, they could surprise with Michael Penix Jr. in the second year, and we'll see what the Panthers can do, with Bryce Young getting a little bit better. But I think the Buccaneers take this NFC South title again.
Jason Licht just does such a great job as the general manager. He's just so locked in. It's to the point now where a John Spytek is getting hired away from Tampa Bay to do the Raiders general manager job because the infrastructure in Tampa Bay is so good. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, as we tell you every single episode. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.